Good afternoon, everyone. We're here with Solomon Zakinov here on the Retail Corner podcast, and we're going to be talking a little bit about logistics and just the world of moving stuff around. And I want to welcome Solomon. Good to see you. How's your day been so far?
Yeah, great to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
Good to hear. So everybody kind of knows who you are. We've talked a little bit, but can you kind of walk me through who is Solomon? Why are we talking to you today a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and founder of a company called ShipX. We are a parcel delivery company, so tech-enabled, using technology to better deliver parcels, e-commerce parcels more specifically, for retailers, 3PLs, and anybody who ships goods to consumers.
Okay, cool. So ShipX, is that like a last mile thing, or is it the middle of the?
Yeah, so we are a last mile delivery company. We specialize on that's where we started and specialize, and then as an extension of that service offering, we do offer middle mile transportation services as well for companies looking to further enable their parcel delivery solutions they currently have in house.
Okay, that's kind of cool. So you work with a whole bunch of different companies. It's not just you guys out there.
It's a pretty diverse bunch. For the most part, our main segment target audience is like those middle, I would say mid-tier in size retailers. So companies that you would probably see in a mall. Those kind of mall retailers versus the big box retailers. And then we also kind of go a little bit further down market as well, working with kind of SMBs and like digitally native brands that are doing some really cool things. So it kind of runs the gamut, but that's the typical kind of customer base.
That makes sense. So like, what brought you to that? Like what made you fall in love with logistics? If you're in love with logistics,
I've been in the space for about 10 years now. I kind of started out in e-commerce, so it kind of was a natural course and direction because e-commerce is very logistics heavy. You need to know how to, just as well as you need to know how to sell a product, you got to make sure it actually gets to the end consumer.
Yeah.
So, we kind of my work there took me to product fulfillment on the warehousing side and working with a ton of different e-commerce brands where I ultimately went and also worked at a company that did last mile delivery. And I kind of learned about this entire ecosystem that's out there for last mile delivery and kind of fell in love with that to want to kind of pursue this.
That's cool.
Is, kind of, again, helping companies execute the last mile.
That's cool. So we're talking about you working with a whole bunch of different companies, whole bunch of different retailers, or just people who, merchants kind of thing. And so how do you what's the secret sauce of bringing a partner in?
Yeah, so for us, and just in general, I think for most companies, it's I think one of the challenges we had starting out was identifying what that target audience was. When we kind of first started out, we thought we'd be a really, really good product for like the really, really big box companies, Amazon, who needed additional last mile support, or like a Walmart. And then we realized those companies are they basically have their own networks. They have so much assets.
Sure.
So I think just generally, like when just generally speaking across anything, when you want to like just launch a product or a company or a service, it's really important to kind of understand, in my opinion, what like a first, second, or third best customer base might be. Because a lot of times what you think your first best customer base is going to be is not what it is.
Yeah.
And it even looks like it's the fourth, fifth, as you kind of reiterate the product. And even we went through, many different kind of iterations of our product to where we are today, which I'm sure it'll continue to iterate as we scale. So yeah. I think that's a big key feature that a lot of people like, oh, let me sell to this guy, and like this guy might not really need the product. So
you can't be everybody. You can't be everything.
Right. So let's so if you can't sell to this guy, like it's better to have a backup plan of who that second guy is, or you're like kind of running out of cash, and you're like, holy, we don't have.
Sure.
We don't have that other anybody else to sell to. So
that makes sense. So, but you were focusing on brick and mortar, and then now you're doing a little more e-commerce stuff, a little more.
Well, just generally, our product is a really good fit for any kind of brick and mortar is kind of just a good idea, just to as far as who we like to target.
They're
anybody who really sells online. So it's really anybody who sells online in whatever capacity, or even better, I think, would be to say anybody who ships a lot of products. So it could be a warehouse. We work with a lot of 3PLs. we do work with a lot of cool brands, again, digitally native brands that are, even software style products that are out there, and things of that nature.
So you were talking about working with different brands and everything else. Like, what's the tech breakthrough that like you guys are using for that? Like,
So
how are you doing all that?
Our product for our product specifically, what we really brought to the market was a way to enable bigger shippers to work with smaller delivery companies using technology that kind of closed that gap. So up until now, it was really, unless you're a massive retailer with incredible, talking about millions and millions of packages a year of volume, you wouldn't really have the bandwidth or the sortation capability or even the technology to go and try to procure all of these, smaller carriers. And what our system does, and what we're really good at, is essentially procuring not only those delivery companies do a great job in their local markets. We cover 44 states, but also bridging the gap technology-wise, so that, for example, there is a tracking number, right? Because from an experience standpoint, you want to mimic UPS and FedEx as much as possible because that's what the market is used to.
Sure.
We didn't want to bring something to market that was so new that a retailer would have to kind of educate their consumer. So our product is very similar to UPS and FedEx. It's just that we're enabling the smaller delivery companies to work with the bigger shippers and creating that kind of connection through, a mix of assets. So we do have some physical infrastructure, but mainly through technology to be able to enable that and do it profitably, right? Because one of the things about being in a logistics company in general is that it's very important to maintain your margins, because at the end of the day, you are in a physical space, right? This is physical movement of products, physical movement of goods. So it's not like you're paying just purely for software. Like, we have to make sure the people that are doing these delivers are getting paid, and so on and so forth.
So I hate to see when there's a delivery and it says dropped off at local shipper or whatever, and then it sits there for 3 or 4 days. It's like, it's in the abyss, And so you're kind of filling that gap. That's cool. And so with all the different little shippers and rural shippers and everything else, because everybody's ordering online now and everything. How are you staying more current? How do you stay ahead of that? Because Amazon and Walmart and everything else like that, they're closing those gaps and they're fixing those things every single day. How are you staying above that curve?
That's a great question. I think just in general, I think, as a company like ours who started out, who's like, we're basically competing for the same product that UPS and FedEx really has. In other words, this is volume that is being delivered today through someone. This isn't like a software that we've invented that's like Uber, and there was only cabs until then. So for us, just trying to break through, we need to have a better narrative and a operational solution that UPS and FedEx, for example, might not be able to offer. And in general, the companies we work with are big on diversification of their suppliers and who they work with, their vendors, as any company should be, right? Just business continuity in general. You want to have multiple.
There's an old saying about
multiple ways of achieving the same objective, right?
Yeah.
So if you're producing a T-shirt, and unfortunately, your factory goes on fire, if you never really figured out a way to maybe source it somewhere else, you really, really put your business in jeopardy. So, just as a basic, kind of stalwart, I think most companies should ask themselves, is my product good enough to be a good alternative?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we set out to do at first. We're like, let's make a really, really good alternative.
Okay.
That UPS, something happens with UPS, which we've seen this year. They had a strike, and that might have, although it didn't materialize, that fear factor was real, and it was justified, right, from these shippers. So for us, it was okay, great. We create a great alternate product. Now we have a great delivery solution. Now what is the value added solution? What is the value that we really bring to the table beyond it, right? So for us, it was like, there was the marketing element of it, right, which was making sure that it was a unified, seamless customer experience.
Sure.
And we, even though like we are using, multiple different methods of delivery, it's at the end of the day, it's always a ShipX label. It's always a ShipX tracking number. And the customers can appreciate that because they're not, they're not sending their customers to 20, 30, 50, 100 different carriers, right? They're just working with one entity.
Well, every company's going to have a plan A, B, C, D.
Right.
EFG, we're all in plan
right
now.
And then for us, it's also like from a customer services standpoint or from a customer facing standpoint. And then if you look at from a standpoint of like, from a sales standpoint or from a shipper standpoint, we also wanted to make the idea of working with a carrier like ourselves easier. So how do we do that, right? Simpler pricing, easy to understand, rating and things like that. So that also kind of helped us really move along the narrative of like, use UPS and FedEx or use whoever you're using now, but give us a chance because we do it really, really well. We also do it really well. And in multiple, you could save money. You could better translate those savings to your customer base as well, right? Because ultimately, most shipping these days is free, right? We have to look into that as well.
Sure.
Most companies do still want to do free shipping. So if we can make it easier for someone to charge free shipping, then we think there's a win there as well. And then lastly, we're the first carbon neutral parcel delivery company. So we're also kind of cutting edge in that way. In that sense, is like we're moving the narrative around EV delivery.
How are you achieving that? That's
so we do it multiple ways. We have like a 3-pronged approach to it. The first step is through EV delivery. So we're using vehicles that are using alternative fuel, either hybrids or EVs. Obviously, EVs being the cream of the crop for those because they're entirely, for the most part, carbon neutral. The second method, another that we've noticed really well is actually helping compensate drivers more and companies more that are executing these deliveries for using an EV. I mean, we've noticed money and cash incentive is a great way to have.
Cash is king, man. Yeah.
Have, people want to leverage whatever you want to do, right? You want to change someone's mind. Yeah. Having a cash incentive to do it is a great way to do that. And I think that most companies, could benefit through some kind of a cash incentive and like a rewards program. I guess it's similar methodology there, what retailers use. And then for the third step is we offset free of charge as a part of our standard service every single package that goes to our network that is not able to, or parts of the network, for example, that we don't have being done using an EV kind of delivery or even an alternative fuel vehicle.
Do you think that Walmart or Amazon or somebody or UPS or FedEx or something like that, somebody of that size could go carbon neutral?
Well, they definitely are trying. I mean, Amazon is leading the way with I don't know if you saw the news. They're trying to working with Rivian, right? That partnership and purchasing 100,000 vehicles. So I definitely think it's doable, but for at that scale, it's just, especially because Amazon isn't built that way, or Walmart especially wasn't built that way, right? So they have to retrofit everything, whereas like we kind of started from the ground up doing it, so it's a lot easier for us than them. It's also just the way our networks are built. We're just so much more lean.
Sure.
We don't necessarily need all that fat that they need, which is like fulfillment centers. We don't need any of that. We could do really lean, smaller sortation facilities, very automated, and at scale and things like that. So
that's really cool. I love that you're kind of moving through and you realize that there are different sizes of companies and everything else like that, and all those people are needing people, because logistics is becoming a huge just well of talent. And
the market is really adapting. The market is really changing to bring in some really cool companies doing some really cool things, and it's an exciting time in the space because really up until 5 years ago, the idea of logistics, from what I know, didn't exist.
Yeah,
so it's really kind of 5 to 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And especially in the last 3 years with the pandemic, you see all these new startups coming in, and it's exciting. It's cool to see.
So if somebody's wanting to start their career in logistics, or if they're eyeing a career in that supply chain piece, what do you think they need to do? Is there a certification they need to get? Is there a training or what's the world looking for right now?
Yeah, I've noticed it really just depends on where they want to work. So I mean, if you want to get a job working at like a bigger retailer, they really look at they like to look at operational certifications and stuff like Six Sigma, the Green Belt Black Belt program, which is a certification. They like to look at that kind of stuff as a kind of a precursor to a good candidate for them, right? Of course, the supply chain, these days they have a lot of good supply chain schools, that route, and that's more for the bigger companies. But I think people could even get a start. One of the things that I've noticed is, a great way to start is just seeing what a warehouse even is. I think going into a warehouse or a truck, seeing what that even is. You could start really low level because you might not like it too. It is, at the end of the day, it's a services-based business. It's very time-sensitive stuff a lot of the time. So you got to really love the move. You got to really love the idea of like, it gets gritty. You know what I mean? And it's a warehouse, and it's a truck.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like even just to get your hands in it, just roll up your sleeves in it, I think is a great way to see if it's a career path for somebody. I mean, that's where I started. I started packing boxes in a warehouse. So.
Yeah. So you started there putting boxes on truck and everything else like that. Did you have a mentor? Did you have somebody that pulled you and said, "Listen, there's more to the puzzle"?
Yeah, I've been lucky. I mean, you know, my you know, both of my brothers had something to do with e-commerce. One of my brothers was more in logistics, specifically kind of on the warehousing side, which is kind of what was my segue into warehousing, where we worked together for many years at a company he founded, where I kind of led sales. So that was kind of more on the BD side and getting to work with all these different companies. So he really mentored me a lot. And then I had really the privilege of working under a lot of fantastic experts in the space. So I've been very lucky with someone with a non-formal logistics background, right? Not with that, you know, through the educational side of being able to, you know, although ground up, right, packing boxes and starting from scratch, still having, you know, the ability now to kind of, you know, have those mentors that are maybe running, you know, even way larger logistics companies, or have those VP level roles at the Walmarts of the world that were able to kind of guide me through it. Because there is a lot of red tape, especially at those high levels. And it's not actually something that even interests me as much, like to work at maybe a VP at a Walmart. I don't know if I'd want to be a VP. So for some people that is great. I guess that's where they want to end up. But you know,
I'm pretty sure you would want to be a VP at Walmart. Just put it out there. Just
you know.
But
you know, it's just the kind of the idea of like, do you want to work at you know, at that level is very different than you know, where I've kind of been used to, and it's just a different space. It's like the big box is its own kind of animal, and then there's so many like startups in the space, you know, and that's the startup culture, right, which is super fun.
Yeah.
And kind of the idea that I'm trying to get across is, no matter where you want to work in logistics, I think there's a lot of opportunity today to, you know, if you want to make a career out of it, to make a career out of it, for sure.
And everybody that I've talked to in logistics that is part of the gritty, is part of the movement of it all, they're really open to that mentorship. They're really open to saying, you know what, I'll help you out. I'll see I'll have those conversations, kind of thing. And so it's kind of cool. So I think we're running a little bit short on time. I just need one more question from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if you had to go back in time and give yourself advice, or give somebody that's just starting out advice, what's the one thing that you would make sure that they know?
Well, from getting started in logistics, I think the advice of, you know, going and seeing what it looks like, or trying it out a little bit, or starting when the ground floor is good, because there's so many local jobs, especially now peak seasonality. I would say from a business standpoint, make sure you, from like a, you know, starting a business standpoint, I would say the number one thing is making sure you understand the customer before you go and you really start spending a lot of money. Right. And you kind of really start investing more and more into a product that might not have a market fit. Because even for us, it took us a while to understand like who the customer really is and who's the ideal customer. And I think that's very, very important to know, like, who your customer is, because the marketing, the branding, the product, most important than the product, the way you service that account, right, is dependent on who you're working with, right? What is the size of the company? Who are the stakeholders at that company? Are you working with a CEO, or are you working with a founder owner, or are you working with a director of logistics, you know, that has to report to 10 other people? So I think that's like that's like a good piece of advice, because ultimately you can kind of get lost in that whole, you know, trying to sell something that might not be ready to still be sold yet. I think that's important.
That makes sense. Okay, that wraps us up. And Solomon, thanks for speaking with us. I'm sure that everybody will reach out to have you as a mentor, and we'll have all your information below. Excited for it. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Appreciate it. Perfect. Thanks again, sir.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.